Excuse me. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree. I'm a transgender woman. Excuse me. I talk about all things horror, and this is horror icons, and today we're talking about Leatherface. Leatherface is the I want to say primary villain of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. But that's not very accurate. He's one of the villains in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre films. It's actually his entire family are the villains. Leatherface himself is actually pretty innocent for the most part, and is pretty much a victim a victim as well. Now, don't get me wrong. Leatherface does kill people and torture them, but Leatherface is depicted as, I will say, simple-minded. They're not clear as to what his mental capacity is, but he is definitely not fully aware of his faculties and not very mature. So his family does bully him into doing things, as we see even in the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre. With the exception being the Netflix Chainsaw Massacre, which I've already reviewed, where he pretty much has no family and his motivation is getting revenge for the last of his family, essentially, in a roundabout way, being murdered, or at least killed, inadvertently killed by some people. And then he just goes on a murder spree. So that would be the exception. But that was kind of a requel / reboot of the franchise. So it's up to you whether or not you consider that canon. There are quite a few Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, and I believe the vast majority of them do feature Leatherface doing his thing with his chainsaw and wearing a skin mask throughout the franchise. Leatherface is one of the scarier horror icons, partially because he doesn't really know what he's doing. So he can't be reasoned with. He has no fear. He can't be bought or bribed. And I wouldn't say, like Michael Myers, he can't be killed, because we don't know if he can be killed or not, because he's never been killed. But we do see he is somewhat sadistic in that he does enjoy playing with his victims. Now, I would say Leatherface is probably most likely on the autism spectrum of sorts, or has some other, maybe he has brain damage or some other mental capacity issue which limits his brain power. He's not very mature, not very intelligent. It's not 100% clear. We do see that he is bullied by his family, and they are brutal to one another, and we see that they're all deranged. So it's possible his maturity and whatnot was stunted by this family who just never let him learn. He never went to school or anything. But he is very childlike in his mannerisms in some of the films, and in his interests in some of the films. I'll do a separate horror icons on the rest of the family in the Texas Chainsaw franchise, but that's going to be difficult because there's not a lot of consistency in the franchise, in the timelines. So that might take at least 2, maybe 3 videos to discuss them all, and parse out what is going on with each family. But in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and in the the majority of the remakes of it. Um, he works at a slaughterhouse. He butchers animals, and the slaughterhouse goes out of business at some point. And the family is, well, frankly, they're looking for meat, and they're getting this meat by way of people in the community, or hitchhikers and passerby, etc. Basically, anyone that they can catch and bring home and turn into meat. So I don't. Well, I mean, I guess you could say they're cannibals, but we're just talking about Leatherface here again. We're not really talking about the rest of the family. Leatherface does not tend to be the one doing the kidnapping or the setting the traps. He tends to be the one chasing down the usually teenagers or young adults that stumble into his world, and he does wield a chainsaw and is usually the one to kill the victims, but not always. And sometimes he tortures his victims before he kills them. And sometimes he just tortures them anyways. And, they happen to be the one that survives. So, there is that as well. In all depictions of Leatherface, he's a stocky dude. He's a big, like 6 foot tall, probably 350, 400 pounds, buff as fuck, super strong. He's a giant cow of a man, you know, huge dude. And he's often depicted with exceptional strength, which does lend to him being scary because, a lot of the people he's going after are smaller people, little teenage girls and boys, not very old, not very tough, not very built, not very athletic. I wouldn't classify Leatherface as sadistic as the rest of his family. And I don't think I would say he's necessarily motivated by um, evil intentions. He's just sort of in this diabolical family, and he wants to be a part of the family, so he does his part. Because he probably doesn't know any better. To him, it's like, hey, family. This is like a concept. Even any child can grasp family. I know family, and family are the ones who feed me and protect me and love me, so I, do what they tell me to do. And that's probably Leatherface's mentality and his motivation, which is basically, my family says do this, so I do it. However, he is brutal in his kills. And like I said, he does torture his victims. He does like to play with his food. So he does have a mean streak about him. Don't get me wrong. He's not entirely innocent either. His hands are not clean. Which is one of the things that makes him interesting because he's rather complex as a, I guess I would say serial killer, mass murderer of sorts. And so he's definitely one of the more interesting ones. Because, he does have a proper motivation, but it's pretty simple, pretty, animalistic, basic. It's just, basically, it's just do what the family says to do. He's protecting his family because they're protecting him. So that's pretty much it. I would say there's at least 3 different, possibly 4 different incarnations of Leatherface, depending on how you look at it and which timeline you're going to follow. But generally speaking, he's pretty much the same character in all the timelines. There aren't major differences between one from another. I think my favorite Leatherface is still the one from the Netflix Chainsaw Massacre because that's still my favorite of the franchise. But, they're all good. They're all worth watching, so stay cool.